Hello everyone, my name is Sarafi and I'm happy to meet you all. And today we're going to be talking about card names. So, let's talk about it. Obviously, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is produced in Japan. It is not a American company, even though there are distributors in the United States and Europe and in the Middle East. The game is produced in Japan for a Japanese audience with Japanese language. And sometimes this causes problems because while it would be very easy for you to directly translate all of the words that Japan puts in their titles, there are cultural differences and there are marketing concerns that prevent people from actually doing that. And that usually isn't a problem, but only because Konami English has learned from their past mistakes. And there has never been a bigger fiasco in the translation of a card than with the card Skull Servant. Skull Servant was from the original Legend of Blue Eyes set, very back in the beginning. Level 1, 300 attack, 200 defense, zombie monster. And the original name of this card in Japanese is Wight. And that is, the direct translation would be Wight, which is a type of spirits. Makes perfect sense. And I guess for whatever reason, they chose not to translate that. They chose to call the card Skull Servant instead. Maybe because they thought the name Wight was boring, to be honest. Regardless, this was not a problem for Konami. They've printed other cards that had different names than the Japanese version, and this is just a normal monster, a throwaway, who cares? Well, a few years later, Konami printed another card called Wight King. And Wight King says, the original attack of this card is the combined number of white cards in your graveyard times 1,000. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can banish one other white card from your graveyard to special summon this card. Now, this was Konami's way of establishing an archetype. This is not the first archetype that Konami has printed, that would be Harpy Ladies, but this is one of the earliest examples of an archetype in the game. And because King of the Skull Servants was printed by itself, Konami English thought, okay, no big deal. We will just say that rather than saying you are banishing a white card, because the original Skull Servant does not say white in its name, we will call this card King of the Skull Servants, so it's very obvious that it's connected to the original Skull Servant. And we will just say that this card's original name is equal to the combined number of King of the Skull Servants and Skull Servants in your graveyard times 1,000, and you can banish one other King of the Skull Servants or Skull Servant from your graveyard to use its effect. This is absolutely not what the card does. So, that happened, and this card existed without issue for another couple of years. And then more cards started coming out. So they printed White Prince, White Princess, and they started making puns on white as well. Lady in White and White Mare. Suddenly, it doesn't really make too much sense for you to keep calling the cards Skull Servant. And even if you did, that wouldn't fix the problem. So they rename archetypes all the time, right? Like the branded archetype, I think is called like Stigmatica to reflect off of Dogmatica in Japanese. But it doesn't matter. You can call the cards branded because they're all named branded in English, and you can just refer to them that way. They didn't do that with King of the Skull Servants. They didn't say it's equal to the number of cards with Skull Servant in their name in the graveyard. It says specifically King of the Skull Servants and Skull Servant. So now you have a real problem that more cards are coming out that are expected to be combined in this white archetype. So what did they have to do? They couldn't go back and errata all these other cards because there's no problem with the cards themselves, just with the English printing of them. So Konami does not have to change the effect. The effect is correct. It's just that in the English version of the cards, they wrote it wrong. And they can't just take all the Skull Servant cards off of the shelf and say, this card's called White now, and King of the Skull Servants is now called White King and it has a completely different effect, because there will still be other printings of the cards from the original set, and that's just going to cause a bunch of problems. They did that for Slime, Toad, and Frog the Jam because that was just like a one-off card, who cares? This is an actual deck that people are going to play. So how do you fix the problem? What they had to do for every one of these cards, and they printed cards that are as recent as, this year, last year in terms of like new Skull Servant support. Every card that has been printed after King of the Skull Servants has text in its card name that says, this card's name becomes Skull Servant while it is in the graveyard. So it's not treated as Skull Servant. It's not it's not a Skull Servant card. No, it is specifically named Skull Servant so that it can work specifically with this weird wording of the original attack of this card is equal to the combined number of King of the Skull Servants and Skull Servants in your graveyard times 1,000. Now that they have messed it up this badly and they are still paying for the price of this mistake 20 years later, every other archetype that gets printed in English is very, very consistent. But there you go. That's the story of how Konami English mistranslated a single card, which resulted in them paying a huge cost and a huge weird ruling setup even to this day, because Konami Japan is just printing an archetype. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. My name is Sarafi, and I was thrilled to have all of you with me.